You know how it is. You're walking around the house and you put down your glasses, your keys, and the next thing you know, they've disappeared. And you're tearing up the house looking for that missing thing. It happens to the best of us. You know, you could just put down a super weapon that could level cities and wipe out millions of people anywhere on Earth. And just, you know, forget about it. Just like some keys. Just a silly little thing. Well, that's what keeps happening, and what we're talking about today is the historical concept of broken arrows, a code phrase used by militaries to describe an unexpected event involving nuclear weapons, warheads, or components. These events include the accidental detonation, theft, loss, or firing of a nuclear weapon. And I don't know what's scarier, the fact that people keep losing nukes, or the fact that it happens so often we have a phrase for it now. I'm genuinely really scared. So since the culmination of the Manhattan Project by Cillian Murphy on July 16th, 1945, the USA alone has had 32 broken arrow incidents, with 26 of them being recovered, which means that 6 weapons of mass destruction have gone completely missing. And to reiterate this, that's nuclear weapons. We don't know where they are. They've gone. That's really scary. Why don't we know? Now, that sounds really scary, but don't worry. The Soviet Union has lost a lot more, mainly due to sinking nuclear submarines, and I can't really think of any adverse effects that might have on anything, just nuclear weapons in the water. Say in 1986, just as Gorbachev and Reagan were getting ready for a big summit in Reykjavik, Iceland, a Soviet submarine, the K-219, armed with 30 nuclear warheads, exploded and sank just off the island of Bermuda. Now, unlike Chernobyl, the Soviets actually told the truth this time. They quickly informed the Americans, who surprisingly offered to help. The submarine crew fought bravely after a missile tube exploded, but 3 crew members died, including Sergei Premin, who manually shut down the reactor core. I think that's totally badass, but couldn't escape. The Soviets then tried to tow the sub, but it sank anyway, which is just a classic submarine problem, you know how it is. Meanwhile, the Soviet Politburo had a bit of a panic session, wondering if the Americans would then try and steal the submarine. Luckily, they were told that the sub's design was way too outdated for the Americans to care. There was also a brief freak out about a nuclear explosion, but experts assured them that it was fine. Probably. Now, this time, Gorbachev's government opted for transparency, releasing a public report instead of pretending nothing happened. You know, like Chernobyl. It turns out both superpowers were more focused on the upcoming summit, as this was nearing the end of the Cold War, that led to surprisingly calm and nice cooperative communication, which is very odd for the Cold War. So I'm going to focus more on the USA because information is more publicly available, as Russia is not really known for its transparency back in the Cold War, and definitely not now, unless you're looking for transparency or getting your ass handed to you by Ukrainians. Now, I also don't speak Russian, so no matter how many playthroughs of Stalker I do, nothing is getting in there beyond So I'm going to talk about 5 of the US's nuclear I'm just a girl moments that happened, starting on July the 28th, 1957. After taking off from Dover Air Base, Delaware, the C-124 cargo plane, which nickname was Old Shaky, which doesn't seem like the best choice to transport nuclear weapons. Like, why would you put a nuclear weapon in something called Old Shaky? That's not a good idea. So, unsurprisingly, Old Shaky lost complete power from 2 of its 4 engines over the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it was on the way transporting nuclear warheads to the UK. The plane was still able to fly, but it could not maintain its flight level and was slowly falling out of the sky with a nuclear bomb on board. The C-124 was carrying 3 nuclear weapons and 1 nuclear capsule at the time. Fortunately, none of the weapons had the capsule installed, so they could not detonate. But I just want to cover what a capsule is, because I sure as hell didn't know about it. I'm not really particularly up on my nuclear warheads, Mr. FBI agent who ends up watching this. A capsule is sometimes known as a birdcage and contains a removable pit, which is the core of any nuclear weapon made of fissile material. Basically, the nuclear bit of a nuclear bomb wasn't in there, and I'm 100% sure that the comments will have lots of nuclear experts in who will explain to me why I am wrong on so many levels, and I'm happy for that. I do not claim to be an expert in nuclear bombs. I'm just a guy with a terrible beard. Crew on board knew that the nuclear weapons weren't armed, so they took the decision to jettison 2 of the bombs about 195 kilometers off the shore of Atlantic City, New Jersey, on the way to an emergency landing. Now, if there was a nuclear leak, I'm pretty sure it would have no discernible effect on the future populations for, say, the next 30 years. New Jersey seems like they turned out pretty fine. The crew pushed the nuclear bombs out at 4,500 feet and 2,500 feet respectively, reporting that both weapons submerged instantly and presumably were damaged. They made a safe landing in Atlantic City with the 1 remaining weapon and the capsule. Later, the searches for the weapons were quoted as that they had brought negative results, noting that due to the ocean's depth variation in that area, it was difficult to perform a comprehensive search. It is worth noting that this is the only case I could find that involved a transport plane rather than a bomber or attack plane. Now, due to the dangers of using an attack plane or a bomber, only 1 plane is allowed to fly US nuclear weapons for redeployment, which is the Boeing C-17 Globemaster, lovingly known by crew members as the Moose. This is a bit of a tangent. Now, you may think because this 128-ton behemoth that drops M1 Abrams tanks is a slow, lumbering, strong aircraft, much like its Canadian icon, the Moose, and that's where it gets its name. But no, it's because the C-17, when it refuels, it sounds like a female moose's mating call. To a moose, this sounds like Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On. Just a bit of an odd tangent that I found interesting and no one else will. But there we go. And the next case we have is on the 5th of February 1958. A B-47 bomber with no cool nickname, unfortunately, was carrying a Mark 15 Zero nuke, collided with an F-85, which is also known as a Goblin, mid-air at 3:30 a.m. over Savannah, Georgia. I don't know why. Every time I see Savannah, Georgia, I have to do that accent. I don't really... Is that even the accent in Savannah? The B-47 jet tried to land 3 times, but was so heavily damaged that they could not brake enough to land and slow down. So they decided to try and get rid of the nuke that was on board rather than blow up the base and the surrounding towns and half of Georgia and basically the whole state, because they were also carrying around 400 pounds of traditional explosives alongside the nuke, so it would have been a disaster. They dumped it in the Wassa Sound Bay, about 20 kilometers from the center of Savannah. The bomb did not explode after dropping the 7,200 feet into the bay, but the nuke was never found, despite the fact there was an extensive search using divers, boating equipment, and they were equipped with sonar and Geiger counters. The Department of Energy believes that the bomb is resting about 15 feet below the seabed. I like to think that there's like a hermit crab walking around with like the best ever glowing house. But the Department of Energy has said that there are not plans to try and recover this nuke, despite the fact they know it's there. That is because the chance of detonation and leaks are very, very low. So they worry more about that if digging would cause upsets and then maybe trigger an explosion. So best just to leave it with the hermit crab to chill. He's fine. Next, less than a year after that, in September 25th, 1959, somewhere near Washington state coast, a P-45, a flying boat, which I guess is a thing. Like, why is it not called a floating plane? They crashed this P-45 flying boat in the Pacific Ocean. Now, in my research, this is one where the details are scant on why the crash actually happened. But all 10 of the crew were rescued, but the nuclear weapons on board were not recovered. Luckily, no nuclear material was in the devices, and they now sit at the bottom of the ocean. But the concern could be that other non-nuclear states could salvage the bomb and therefore reverse engineer the weapons to create their own nukes. Well, the US government has luckily thought of this, and they say that if they, the most powerful country in the world with almost limitless resources and just an amazing amount of military force, cannot find this nuclear bomb in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, they doubt that a fat dude with a bad haircut and no soul would be able to find it. No soul. No soul, that's excellent word. Excellent. The next case was on January the 24th, 1961 in Goldsboro, North Carolina. A B-52 broke apart while on a mission and accidentally dropped 2 nukes. One bomb's parachute successfully deployed with incidental damage when it landed, but the other bomb fell over 10,000 feet and broke apart on its impact, narrowly avoiding an unplanned Hiroshima tribute. Commie hunter and most oiled down hair chap 1962, Defense Secretary Robert McNamara pointed to the incident as just how close the US has come to accidental nuclear disaster. He said, "By the slightest margin of chance, literally the failure of 2 wires to cross, a nuclear explosion was averted." Like, that's how serious this was. This is very close to Goldsboro, North Carolina not being a thing anymore. And how the hell would the world survive without Goldsboro? And it's probably a lovely town. It's nicer than where I live. The part of the bomb containing the uranium could not be recovered. They dug down over 50 feet in the farmland where the impact happened, but the uranium was so heavy and dense that it just sank in the boggy, waterlogged farmland. They couldn't find it, so now there's just a bit of Goldsboro, North Carolina that if you want to dig anywhere, you have to get special permission from the Air Force. And they have planted an outcropping of trees on top of the estimated location on the farm. And boy, I would not want to live on that street. What's that street called? What? It is possible for someone to say, "Hey, come back to my farm on Big Daddy Road and I'll show you my nuke." That is a real sentence that some farmer in Carolina can say. So the next incident was on the 5th of December 1965 in the Philippine Sea. An American Navy pilot was loading his A-4 Skyhawk plane onto the elevator of the USS Ticonderoga. The plane was carrying a B-43 thermonuclear bomb for a training exercise, which I feel like you should just build a dummy bomb rather than have a live nuclear weapon be used for training exercises. Feels like quite short-sighted. I feel like accidents happen. Let's not put the nuke on the bomb while we're doing training. It's like that old adage of never point your weapon at anything you're not prepared to shoot. With the new one being, don't attach a nuke to a plane you don't intend to send 100,000 people to the Shadow Realm with. Basically, the A-4 Skyhawk plane with a nuke just fell off the side. Like, it just fell off. Here is a quote from the Chief Petty Officer Delbert Mitchell speaking to Naval History magazine. "Suddenly, the plane directors' yellow shirts began to blow their whistles frantically, while crossing their fists, directing the pilot to set his brakes. But the Skyhawk kept rolling. The directors ran to the plane, urgently signalling and blowing their whistles," Mitchell wrote. The Skyhawk did not stop. One blue shirt threw a chock around the starboard main mount tyre, putting himself in harm's way to stop the rolling aircraft. "We watched helplessly as the attack plane and pilot sank into the abyss. The ship continued moving forward." Mitchell wrote, "It was horrifying to watch a human being die before our very eyes, powerless to save him." Yikes. That's pretty intense, but the surrounding survivors did try and alert the pilot, and throwing the chocks behind the wheels of the plane, it was just not able to be stopped, and the pilot just sank and fell off the side. Like a crazy accident, but it just so happened that he had a nuclear bomb attached to the plane. The crew sprung into action, but all they could find was the pilot's helmet. The plane, the pilot, the nuke had all sank about 16,000 feet to the bottom of the sea. Now, this is one of the most dangerous cases of broken arrow because the bomb is capable of detonation, as the core of the B-43 thermonuclear device is not removable. So in theory, a nuke in the sea could blow up at any time. And the scariest thing about this is that the bomb is located about 70 miles off the Ryukyu Islands as part of Japan, the area containing Okinawa, about 600 kilometers from Taiwan and about 800 kilometers from Shanghai. Now, the craziest part of this is that the USA did not tell Japan or any of the surrounding countries about the incident for over 20 years, only informing them in about 1989. There was just a nuke under that island for years without them knowing. That's scary. That's scary. Now, all of these happened in the 1950s or 60s, and safety has improved massively in the last few years. So there hasn't been any broken arrow incidents in like the recent years, has there? So we're all fine. Oh wait, there has. Well, it's not just that nukes fall off the side of the ships anymore. It's that they just don't track them very well. In fact, in 2007 at the Minnow Air Force Base in North Dakota, a B-52 set off not knowing that they have 6 accidentally mounted and ready to drop nuclear weapons on their wings. For 2 whole days, the USA had absolutely no idea where 6 of their nuclear weapons were. Mad. Now, it's not just, the Cold War superpowers. My little island of the UK and the French have made a big mistake before. So once a British nuclear submarine and a French sub carrying nuclear warheads actually had a fender bender in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Like, they just crashed into each other. The HMS Vanguard and the Le Triomphe crashed into each other on the 4th of February 2007. While there was no contamination, the fact that 2 nuclear subs just crashed in the middle of the ocean is absolutely crazy. Now, I like to think that both of the captains were just looking at their phones and not paying attention and just crashed. And they're looking at the little periscope and I just check my text, and then it's... So those are the covering of the Broken Arrow incidents. They are just absolutely maddening to me that we have this insane nuclear capability and they are not being checked and watched in any way. I hope this video has made it easier for you to sleep at night knowing that the most destructive weapons in history just go missing all the time. Sleep tight. Bye. Thank you for joining us here at So It Goes Productions, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. Feel free to click on the playlist in the video to continue with the rest of the series. And thank you for watching.